there were a few things that happened early doors that were completely unfathomable, really, weren't there? I mean, Justin Bieber's the big example that moved things forward.
Yeah.
And that's not in any blueprint anywhere. That will probably never happen again for any other brand. So do you want to talk us through the sort of key initial moments that really got the brand out there?
Yeah, I mean, like if I go really far back, the first one was a band called Kicks, if you remember those.
Yeah.
And I met them guys at a little festival in Wales, and I give them some caps, and they wore them on the stage, and it was like, okay, sick. There's 400 people watching this. Some of them will buy the brand. We put a little stall up at that like event that was on. Tie-dyed some t-shirts, sold them around, had the caps there, and that like got our name out a little bit. And then they wore it on TV, and it was like, okay, this is like UK national television, and we have absolutely zero capital, so we can't spend to put on there, but our name is on there. So that was like the first step. Then you'd start seeing names come in on the big cartel orders that you didn't know. So it was like, okay, it's not just friends and friends of friends buying this anymore. People are starting to buy it. And over that like course of the first 3-4 years, I was obviously heavily into like Mac Miller's music. He was a massive idol of mine. And he was touring in Manchester. And I felt that was an opportunity for me to put Represent on him one way or another if I could get it on him. And I'm not one of them guys that will go and try and do things like that. But I just felt at the time like my clothes were cool and he's cool and I love his music. Surely he'll love the clothes. And I just sent a message to his manager on Twitter. And I was like, oh, can I pull up to the tour bus and give you these clothes? He's like, yeah, pull up. Chuck some clothes in the door. Comes on stage in Manchester in the Represent stuff. Puts it as his profile picture the next day. And then he was down in London like 2 days later and he was like, oh, Mac wants you to come on the bus. So I was like, okay, sick. So jumped on this bus, met Mac. That was such a cool thing because like then not only is it on national TV in like all over the UK with Kicks, then you've got Mac Miller who's put it as his profile picture on Instagram, which was new at the time, and Twitter. And it says Represent across his sweater. So then more people started buying it and we got like a little bit of traction in the US and across Europe. And that kind of snowballed a little bit of like capital into the back where I could actually start doing things that I wanted to do. And it wasn't just a t-shirt and a sweater with Represent across it.
What does Represent actually mean to you?
In the beginning, it didn't really mean anything. It was just a cool word that like, it was a cool word that I loved, and it looked great when I'd written it out, whether it was a script or whether it was in a font. And I think over the years, like I fell out of love with it for a while, but then I fell back in love with it. And then I realized like, I guess it's an abbreviation of us. Like we're representing ourselves. We're like, Represent is who we are as a brand and as people. And I guess that's what the name means now.
And that's why now, if we fast forward, obviously we'll paint a picture as we go, but everything is so brand, campaign, visual, people, ethos, value led.
Yeah.
So it really feels that the brand from the inside out is being represented outwardly.
Yeah, exactly. And I know like the word community gets thrown around a lot, but it's really like such a communal brand, whether it's the team in the headquarters or the customers that love buying it that become friends through it and stuff like that. Like it's all very communal.
And if we just go back to the Mac Miller situation, the message that really stands out to me there is essentially backing yourself.
Yeah.
Because you did something that a lot of people wouldn't think was even possible to do, which is just have a pop, give it a go, send the message, see what happens. And I think it's more common these days. People know that you can go out there and give things a go, but ultimately business, taking risks, that's what that is all about. And that one risk to just put yourself out there, because there's a lot of pride attached to it. So what if you'd said no?
Exactly. Yeah.
You might have felt horrible. You might have thought, oh, my clothes are terrible. I'm a bad person. Oh, Mac Miller doesn't know. I didn't get through to the person I backed myself. I thought I would. And that was a risk that you took, but you took it.
Yeah.
And then not only was he wearing your clothes, not only was the name that you'd chosen front and center, but you met somebody cool. You met somebody you admired.
Yeah. And I guess back then, like when I was pretty much a kid then. He was a kid as well. And like we had shared interests and I loved his music. He loved the clothes. That like now the age we live in is so different with social media. You can pretty much reach out to anyone, right? And it's not so uncommon to get your clothes on somebody, or a lot of brands will pay different influencers, artists, whatever it is to. But back then it was literally the start of that whole social media thing. So it was a lot I guess it was a lot more difficult to do it, but at the same time, when you did do it, it was very impactful.
And that was stage one of many of these spikes that came along. And then Justin Bieber was the one that there's been many along the way. But I'd say the next ring in the ladder that has always stood out to me is just the ridiculousness of you guys rolling up to where he was staying and everybody thinking it was him, and it was just you being like, just delivering some clothes, don't worry.
Yeah, that was a crazy day.
What was the situation there? Because again, it was a risk that you took to try and make something happen, and it happened again.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was my friends that owned a bar called Tattoo in Manchester, and they invited Bieber there because he was performing that night, and they just opened the restaurant and bar up, and they invited us down just as like guests to fill the bar out whilst he was coming in. So it wasn't just full of random people that would ask Bieber for pictures. And we were just at the bar, and obviously we're all head to toe in rap. Like the full crew was out, 6 of us or something at that time. And he walked in and he was like, what hat is that you're wearing? I'm like, what's this? And then James, the guy who works for me, was like, I'll take my number, gave it to the security guard. They exchanged a few things. And then the next minute we're pulling up at his house with a boot full of clothes, and he wore it for the rest of the tour.